Hi, I'm Tony McAleer, author of The Cure for Hate, a former white supremacist journey from violent extremism to radical compassion. And I want you to join us today on Dal Barron's podcast with Montel Williams. And we're going to explore the DNA of the country with regards to race, the state of race relations in the country, and what is the epiphany needed to bring us out of this place.
Welcome back to part two of our delicious conversation. We're talking about something radically important to not just America, but maybe the world. And that is this consideration of the polarization between the people of our nation, of the world. In the break, we were just talking about how this rise of radicalism has taken place in Italy. They now have a nationalist leader. It's rising in Germany, a country that it was seemed impossible for it to rise in because there was a national shame about the Nazi groups. It's risen there to, I believe Tony was telling me, 20%. We see it in Sweden. We see it in Hungary. This polarization is not exclusive to America. But as the most powerful, quote, most powerful nation in the world, maybe we can lead differently. We're certainly not doing right now. So let's come back. By the way, if you didn't hear part one of this show, you really need to go back and listen to it. And not on twice speed, but actually listen to it and take notes and pay attention, because this is a wake-up call from two people who would have been on absolute opposite ends of a spectrum, who are coming together to find a way to try and recognize how we can come together and find peace and recognize each other and validate each other. So, as I said in part one, our first guest is Montel Williams. He was the host of the Montel Williams Show, an award-winning show that was brought into the living rooms of America for 17 years, was extremely successful. The other is Tony McAleer. Tony is an ex-neo-Nazi who is now the author of The Cure for Hate and also the feature of a documentary called The Cure for Hate and Witnessing Auschwitz. I know both of these gentlemen, and I wanted to bring them together in a way that would really make a difference. So, Tony, can you sort of walk us into this? Because we've been talking about America is this nation brought up on hate, still breeding hate. The difficulty of that change is, multiple millions, multiple hundreds of millions. But it starts with us. It starts with us as individuals. So talk to us about that transformation for you. What brought about you going from the neo-Nazi white supremacist to becoming this guy you are now, which is, as I called you, the Neo-Compassionist, a guy who's now very much pro-compassion, as it says over your shoulder, compassion is radical. Tell us about that journey for you.
Well, when I was in the depths of despair in that movement, because it's so dysfunctional. It's so dysfunctional to be in that angry space all the time, surrounded by angry people. It's incredibly draining, and the catalyst was the birth of my daughter. Montel, sort of talked about the moment where the idea came in the head, and that as you were saying that, I went instantly to being in the delivery room and holding my daughter for the first time. And not that it was a road to Damascus moment, but it began the process of unfolding everything and holding my daughter, and her eyes open, and my face is the first picture her brain is going to take, and connecting to another human being for the first time since I couldn't remember when, because I up to that point I was so disconnected. I had my head so far up my ego, it wasn't funny, and I was a complete narcissist. to starting to make decisions with somebody else in mind for the first time since I could remember when. And we come into the world as these bright, curious, we think of little Tony, mischievous, stubborn, defiant, sensitive, open to the world, and then life happens to us, and we learn it's not safe to be some of those things. It's not safe to be sensitive, not safe to be open, and we put on armor to protect ourselves from hurt, and we put on masks in order to feel loved. And that's what I had done. And I think, what was the gift my children gave me? Because I had a son 15 months later. They gave me the gift of compassion. And when we're compassionate with someone, we hold a mirror up and allow them to see themselves reflected in that mirror when they're incapable of seeing it on their own. And I think of seeing how my children looked at me, and so they saw this great, magnificent dad. That's not who I saw when I looked in the mirror. And so they reflected that sort of humanity back. I mean, they couldn't even pronounce the word compassion, able to do it. So that gave me the spark that grew. The second piece to it was my mother, who loved me unconditionally, but her relationship with me was very conditional. And when the children were 4 and 6, and I became a full-time single dad, I needed her help to, and I had to choose between, do I do what's best for the kids, or do I do what's best for my ego and my identity in this movement? And I chose the children. And my mom taught me the lesson, compassion needs to be accompanied by healthy boundaries and consequences. And she said, if you're hanging out with those guys, I'm not going to help you. If you're, on TV doing stuff still, I'm not going to help you. And she used that leverage. And that, I think compassion is often seen as sort of, it's often seen as soft and weak, but when it's combined with healthy boundaries and consequences, it can be a very, very powerful thing. And sort of the third lesson in compassion that I got was from yours truly. Thank you, Dov. And I remember sitting in that office with you, and we'd known each other for 8 or 9 years, 8 or 9 months, and I considered you a friend and that I valued. And I'm in that first counseling session with you that somebody, a good dear friend of ours, gifted me. And do I tell him about the past? And I was afraid, because I thought I would lose the relationship. And in that moment of vulnerability, when I sort of just let it all hang out, and I'd known you for 8 or 9 months, and when you leaned in, as I'm telling you the things I've done, with a smile on your face, and the more you smile, I'm getting angry. And here I am in my first therapy session, and this guy's kind of laughing at me. Well, what gives? And you had that Cheshire Cat grin on your face, and you leaned in and said, I was born Jewish, right? And that receiving compassion from someone who we don't feel we deserve it from is incredibly transformative. And I just want to put the caveat here. I'm not for a second suggesting it's the responsibility of people of color and marginalized communities to go out and hug a Nazi or to do that compassionate work. It's not. But for some people in their journey and evolution as a human being, absolutely, it's the right thing for them to choose to do in the moment. As I think was the case with you and I, and that began a journey. And I think probably over 1,000 hours of one-on-one and group counseling to unravel and heal the deep wounds in my psyche, the deep wounds that were intergenerational, that were cascading, toxic shame. My dad's dad passed it on to him, and he passed it on to me, and this like hot potato down the generations. I think when we think about this at a national level, we can talk about change at a surface level, but we really need to get into the DNA of the country, the DNA that is behind manifest destiny and American exceptionalism and all of those things that.
And that's what Monzel was talking about before. You know, this racism seems to be at a DNA level, you know, but at the same time, one of the things you said, you know, when we were at the UN together, and you said that when you and I started working together, you were out of the movement. But the reason that you and I were working together was because the movement wasn't out of you. And that in many ways is a reflection of what's going on, or what I see is going on in America, is that I use, from a psychology point of view, I use my work in understanding people as, listen, we're all animals. Backed into a corner, for whatever the reason is, a pacifist will be violent. You know, if you're threatening somebody who they love deeply, you know, you're going to find the animal inside of that human being. And part of that programming of that animal has been this vitriol, right? You know, where the movement is not out of the person. And so, like Montel was saying, you know, we see the movement since the 60s of civil rights, but at the same time, it's been a lot more about repression or repressing these things than changing these things. But you're talking about, Tony, this moment of change. So as a nation, what is the moment of the nation? If we get to talk to the nation, what's the moment for the nation that is the birth of your daughter or the birth of your son, or that moment with me where you got compassion? What is that to a nation that can somehow awaken something to say, oh, I might want to question the movement in my head?
Absolutely. And the way that I look at it is, when I was involved in that movement, it sucks people in and it spits them out. The churn of people that go through that movement is tremendous. But this idea, the energy is always there. The people come and go, but there is this, and it's maybe easier to conceptualize when you think about the internet and the ideas and the spaces on the internet that exist, that people pass through. It's this dark, it's evil.
But what is the pull for that? What was the pull for that when you look at yourself and you can see that in the world? It's the pull. You and I have talked about it, but what is the pull into that dark place that exists?
The promise that your voids will be filled. The promise that, you know, for me, I got power when I felt powerless and weak. I got attention when I felt invisible. I got acceptance and brotherhood and camaraderie, or the illusion of that, when I felt unlovable. And it's the false promise to fill those voids that makes it so incredibly seductive. It's actually not about the ideology. The ideology is the pill we swallow in order to get those deeper, darker needs met. But that energy, that seduction, and the people that gravitate to it, like me, I'm just good at recruiting people. I didn't understand it like I do now, but you know, we can tap into these deeper needs. That's what Hitler did with Germany. You know, after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles and the humiliation and a country down on its knees, a population that had lost 3.5 million men, millions fatherless. And some guy comes along and says, I'm talking about the fatherland and we're going to make Germany great again. That the seductive power from that place of weakness, that place of despair.
So for me, it's where the ego is the most bruised, where the ego is the most damaged. It makes it the most easy to manipulate anybody, right? Whether that's into a cult, whether that's, you know, Jim Jones, or whether that's the cult of Adolf Hitler, or in my words, not the truth, in the cult of Donald Trump. Those are cults.
But you asked the question, where is the epiphany moment for America?
Yes.
And if 200 mass shootings in less than 4 months, 5 months isn't the epiphany moment, if the fact that tomorrow we were yanked into the conflict in Ukraine under, outnumbered the way we're going to be, and the fact that we can't seem to get new recruits,
Right.
is an epiphany. If the fact that, there's an entire generation. I mean, I don't know if I had a chance to say this, but very close. Gotcha. In five, four, three, two, one. So, Doug, like I haven't had a chance to tell you this. Like I have a very close friend of mine who's got a son who is borderline genius. I mean, I'm telling you, kid is like, he just finished at an Ivy League school his freshman year, straight A's, everything. I think he got the lowest grade he might have gotten is like a 96 or something.
Poor guy, he's struggling.
Yeah, he's struck, right? Real smart kid, a very sensitive kid, 20 years old. He came to his mother about 2 weeks ago and said, when I graduate, I'm leaving the country. She looked at him, and it's something that's being toyed with almost all of his peers. You know what I mean? There's a generation out here that's done with what we're selling. And you would think that that's that epiphany moment when we as a nation would say, maybe we got to change something. And then we're going to turn around and literally, discriminate against them even more by telling them that you're not, I got another one for you. You're not even going to be considered a citizen if Republicans get in office because you don't have a birthright. It won't be until you graduate from college, you take a test, and you become a citizen. What the devil for the uniform on my back for? To get the citizenship? Hell no.
Right. So when you say that this is this the from, I mean, obviously it's anecdotal, but is this the general idea from this guy and his friends, is that they are looking to leave the country because they've lost faith in the nation?
I'm kind of weirdly fortunate. I've got a child who is the beginning of Generation X or the end of millennials. I don't know which one. I got another one that is definitely a Generation X. And I got another one that is whoever that group is after X between that and the new group. And
so the order is Gen Z are the youngest, then you've got millennials, then you've got Gen X, and then you've got boomers.
Have you heard of this Xennials?
Yes, there's a group between, which is the bridge, and there's always a bridge group.
Okay, well, I mean, it's kind of crazy. So I've got one at every single one of those age groups. The younger they get, the more they are apt to say, America is not what you think it is. America is not what you thought it was. I don't like the America that is here today.
Mm-hmm.
It's because a lot of these kids grew up in neighborhoods where everything is represented. I mean, some of these kids, they've got every machination of mixed child that you can think of as a friend of theirs in their school, whether they be Jewish and white, black, Asian, white, so many different mixes of races these days. Plus, they've got kids that are on the spectrum of whatever you want to call LGBTQ plus beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And they just don't care about how anybody who's an older person feels about their gay friend.
No.
It's their friend. Yeah. And yet we've got the Republicans. Geez, I don't know if you saw this crap today, but there's a lot of AGs from across the country who are banding together to try to call LGBTQ colors and merchandising. They're terming it as if it's some sort of abomination, which is crazy. I mean, it's like, is that what we really need to be worried about? A flag that somebody else wants to wave? If you don't want to wave a flag, don't wave a flag.
Yeah. Well, let's push back on that and say, well, okay, what if you want to wave a Nazi flag?
Well, you know what?
I mean, that's going to be their argument, right?
Or Confederate flag.
Or a Confederate flag, yes, which is even more.
Both of those are synonymous with the same thing, hate.
Yeah.
So why do you you don't get to walk into a theater and say fire.
Nope.
You get to walk into a room and say, I hate. Whether you gun or you do it with a sign like that. That's only to listen.
But the distinction is not the flag, it's the vitriol that goes with it. Right. So when we talk about this epiphany moment, one of the things you brought up, Montel, that I think is an important piece is, which I constantly find myself shaking my head at, there's more mass shootings in America than there has been days in the year so far. And most of those involve children. And most of America, according to the stats, want the changes in gun laws. And I keep saying this, I'm not saying I want to take your guns away. I'm saying, you want to keep your guns, that's fine, but let's have some kind of system that makes it a little bit more responsible, at least. At least.
Car, you got to take a driving test. You got to get
exactly. Right? If a dog, you have to have a freaking dog license. So
this state got it. I gotta not only go get my dog particular shots, but then the state's going to make me buy a little medal that sticks on his collar that says that he got the shot. And not only buy it once, I got to buy that thing 3 times a year. What?
So, but we won't change the gun laws. So when I look at those kinds of things, and it's beyond me, because to me, that seems like an epiphany moment, right? When the first major shooting happened, there was so much outrage and it called for it, and yet it can't get through. That to me says money rules, people don't.
Right.
Because the people want it. The general people they don't want to remove the guns, but they want better rules around it, better regulations around it. So that's the piece that I'm with you on, Montel, which is, what will it take? What is the epiphany? Because I've always said human beings are driven by pain and pleasure, dominantly pain. And so here's enough pain, and we're still not doing it.
Aliens, sorry, I'm being flippant, but when the alien finally lands, and we realize that, oh shit, if he's smart enough to get here, land here, look me in the face, he's way smarter than me. When we realize that, then we might accept the rest of mankind.
Well, I like that as a sci-fi idea. I certainly do, but I don't know that it's enough personally. And what's more is I don't know that, because we can go into a conversation about alien ships that is a whole other conversation. But but hold on a second, because it's an important one. We can go into that, but the truth of the matter is that we know that that's been around for a long time. It's not just a theory anymore. Even governments are coming out and admitting it. And at the same time, is this just there's so many distractions, it becomes another distraction from, well, let's put some rules and regulations in for guns. No, we can't worry about that right now. Everybody needs a gun because the aliens are coming. It becomes another thing to validate shit. Sorry, to validate shit. So this epiphany and these guns and shootings of children and blah, blah, blah. From your point of view, looking at it, Tony, do you see that? Is that, like Montel talks about a generation wanting to leave? I don't know where the hell they go, but they want to leave. When you look at it, do you see a moment that could bring it together?
It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of soul searching. And so if I look at the trajectory of my journey, the first stage of my journey, I left the movement. Movement hadn't left me, and I began the healing work with you.
Yep.
So my first step was I had to heal myself. And I spent 15 years in a movement thinking that it was all about changing the world out there.
Yes.
to no avail. And what I realized in this journey with you was, if I change who I am in the world, I have more influence to change the world. If I change who I am inside, I affect the world outside of me far more than when I try to change the world outside of me. So that that journey inward, and you held me accountable during that journey, and I had to look at things that were bloody uncomfortable. I had to sit in feelings I didn't want to feel.
Yep.
And when I talk about radical compassion, there's three aspects of radical compassion that are important. Number one is your practice of compassion must take you outside your comfort zone. We are not going to solve anything in this country from within our comfort zone. So we have to be prepared to get very uncomfortable in dealing with looking at our past, looking and we can change DNA.
Yep.
But it's not easy. It's difficult and it's uncomfortable. The second piece to radical compassion is, if compassion is alleviating the suffering of another, that there's a social activist element that we must also address the environment which gives rise to the suffering or supports the suffering. And the third aspect of this journey for me is that journey inward, that you must go inward. And that's where that deep soul searching, we have to go inward to the DNA at the core of who we are. And so with the work I did with you, I did that as an individual. And once it got past that part, the next stage of my journey was, well, how can I help people who are where I once was? When I co-founded Life After Hate in 2010 and spent, almost a decade there, that was the work I was doing. And as the process evolved and unfolded and opportunities presented itself, and I got to a point where the next level of my journey is, how do I go back to the communities that I've harmed in reconciliation and repair? And these things sort of organically opened themselves up. The first one was the gay community, because I'd committed, gay bashings in Vancouver. The next one, that opportunity, was with the Indo-Canadian, the Punjabi community in Vancouver, after a vicious murder by, I think I've met the guys who committed the murder. They murdered a Sikh caretaker, Nirmal Singh Gill, 65 years old, who was 5 a.m, a security guard at a local temple. I certainly recruited the guys that recruited them. And so I have to take personal responsibility, even though I can say, oh, I wasn't involved, I wasn't there, it had nothing to do with me.
That's an important point that I want everybody to grasp is, you and I have talked about this before, Tony, and it's part of my life's purpose and mission, is understanding the ripple effect, understanding that it's not necessarily what you directly do, but it's whoever you influence, who influences. And that's the DNA stuff that Montel was talking about. That's generational. And it's what you talked about as this generational DNA and this PTSD that's gone on for generations of passing on the shit as if it was a gift, and saying, well, it's not me. Well, are you in any way changing the direction of that stream? Are you changing the direction of that river and how it flows? What are you doing? Or are you just saying, well, it's not me. That's irresponsible.
And that's where I get, the point I said in the first show is saying apologizing is not enough.
No.
We have to get into this work of of repair, and that involves repairing ourselves too, because
Is there any repair without repairing ourselves?
I don't think so.
Right. So if there's not, how do we get people to repair themselves? Because I know for sure most people don't want to do that. They want to cling on to their identity, their ego. What's your thoughts, Montel?
Many of the people that are out there right now don't and won't admit that there's anything wrong with them that needs to be repaired.
Right. Their ego is bigger than than anything else.
That, but the echo chamber is there.
Right.
So say the most radical thing you want, and there will be someone who will fight, who will support what you said.
Is there any hope? Sorry, I know I'm being hard here, but is there any hope?
We started, said I didn't want to be the doomsday sayer, but I got to tell you, I think that when you look at where we are right now, and we look at where mankind is in a world that is about to pop us like a pimple, you know what I mean? Because of the damage that we've done to the planet and the way we don't care and frivolously just go ahead and respond to that damage as if there's nothing that can be done about it. So let's just go ahead and bring more oil up out of the depths. Where we are right now, I don't know if we have enough time as a species to correct the problems that we have unleashed before it's too late for us to start again.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Tony? Do you think there's any hope?
Yeah, I mean, there's always been great evil in the world. At the same time, there's always been the force of good. It's this battle and tug of war that I don't know that that'll ever end, but it's in that struggle that we define who we are as human beings. You know, to quote Viktor Frankl, a paraphrase Viktor Frankl, you know, in Man's Search for Meaning. And I think we have to do this. We have to try, and we have to be the example, and we have to inspire others through our example, and who we choose to be in every moment of every day gives permission to other people, for better or for worse.
Yep.
And so how do we sort of create a mass movement of people that are choosing to be better human beings and to be able to go on this journey of atonement, of reconciliation, and repair? And you know,
I might suggest to you, Tony, that we've been on this journey more times than we may think.
Mm-hmm.
Be one of these people who believes very strong in the fact that if you look at, if we were to take a line, a pen or pencil, starting on one side of the screen and drawing all the way across the screen to the other side, and let's say that the line goes, I'm putting my fingers up there that far.
Mm-hmm.
The line in between represents, let's say, the 9 billion years that this universe has been here.
Uh-huh.
If we were to put a dot over what we consider to be modern man's existence, it would barely be a dot in the corner.
Close.
We've really only been around here for about 20,000 years. Okay, they found some, hominids and some other shit from 100,000 years ago, but whatever. They moved us. However, I believe, this is me talking what I believe. Along the way, mankind could have done what we've done in the last 100 years 20 times. We could have evolved for 100 years, pushed a button, flattened it all out, ice age, crushed it down to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
All the oil on the planet is from carbonaceous materials that have, over the course of the last 9 billion years, has recycled itself.
Yep.
So, I don't mean harm, but I'm going to say that I think mankind could be on a rocket course towards a reset, because over the course of the next 100 years, there's going to be a reckoning and a resetting.
But a reset is worth nothing if we don't learn anything. And I'm back to that question I had in part one of the show: is how do we cure the fucking amnesia?
That's the reason why there's been about 10 resets, because
Right.
I don't solve
Right.
this thing we call a human being and this brain has the capacity to solve the problem that needs. Bless you.
As we were screening the film in the South, the bearing witness to Auschwitz, there was a theme that came up, over enough times to make it felt, and that was, what about my people? There's mandated Holocaust education, but we can't get critical race theory in schools.
Mhm.
What about my people? And
Well, what about the Holocaust of the Native Americans?
yeah,
That's a
How
Holocaust.
about the Holocaust of the Armenians that Hitler himself said, who cared about the Armenians? That's the reason why he even decided to do his ultimate solution.
Yeah, but even in America, we, let's just keep it here for a minute as the example. Go ahead, Tony.
so that, like, in Louisville, I spent a little bit of time down there, and I really became, it's easy to, from the distance of living in Vancouver in Canada, to be removed from it, but to feel the deep pain in that community. And I met with a bunch of community leaders. There's about 15 of us in the room at the Jewish Community Center there, and there was Muslims, there was Jewish people, interfaith people, African American, and that thing came up again as we were talking about how do we plan, future engagement in Louisville, and this pastor, doctor of psychology, ex-cop, Dr. Kelsey, grew up in the projects down there. And what about my people? And I'd done these journeys of reconciliation with all these other communities, and the one that's looming large, that I know is the next thing I need to do is the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to honestly say, I said, I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a deep, complex. It's the most difficult one that's sort of unfolding before me. And I had to be honest and say, I don't know how. And he said, can I show you? And I said, absolutely. And so we shook hands and agreed, I'm going to go back down to Louisville and spend time with Dr. Kelsey and his congregation, and to, I think one of the things he wants me to do is sit in front of his congregation and let them ask me questions or say what they need to say. And I know it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable.
Sure.
But
you brought up something that I think is the solution, even as we're backing through all this, and talking about these resets and all the rest of it. It's the sidelining of the ego. And the sidelining of the ego is, I don't know how. When you sideline your ego and you say, I don't know how, and the other person says, can I show you? Because I live in that skin. I'm marinating in that every single day. That's where the compassion can have this shift that we need, right? You could never have understood anti-Semitism when you were in the movement. You understand it now in a profound way, yet you're not Jewish, right? But you've been in the synagogues, you've been in the Holocaust museums, you've been with Jews and said, I don't know how. As you and I sat in the synagogue in Vancouver, and you were terrified about how they would respond, and they responded beautifully, wonderfully, generously, because you approached it with, I don't know how. And I think that this is the key that we've all got to get to. is that black people have got to look at white people and go, I don't know how to cross this bridge to get to you. And the white people are going to go, I don't know how to cross the bridge to get to you. And the left is going to say that to the right and the right to the left. But if we're embedded, deeply embedded in our egos, that's where the problem lies, is in the ego embedding of I am right. And right is an act of war. The commitment to being right is an act of war, whether it's with your partner at home, whether it's with your child, whether it's with your community, or whether it's with your nation. If you think you are that right that you can't listen, that is an act of war. And that's what we've all got to confront, is the act of war of the commitment to be right. That's where I think we need to close it up, because we are way over time and it's been an amazing conversation. And I want to ask you, Tony, for one sort of final piece, short piece, that you would want our listeners to go away with, to take a note on, to tattoo in their brain. What would that one piece be?
Pay attention to who you are in every moment of every day, and can I be a better person? And no discussion of this is complete without mentioning the 3 C's, and that's being curious. How do I do this? Is curiosity. Stepping into that situation that's incredibly uncomfortable, and as comfortable as it is, I know it's going to be cathartic for me and for them, is courage. The courage to have that curiosity in those uncomfortable conversations, the courage to engage in the work of repair, and the work of repair and the need to repair comes out of a sense of compassion and alleviating the suffering of others and the suffering of ourselves, to get at the DNA which is poisoning this whole thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Montel, what's your sort of final thoughts here? I know you always do final thoughts at the end of your shows, so let's have a final thought.
I think one person that we give credit to being one of the smartest people in history was a man who lived in the last century, passed away, he's dead. His name is Albert Einstein. He said, one of his very famous quotes is that, to quote him, it's this way: the tragedy of man is what dies inside of him as he lives.
Mm-hmm.
Paraphrase it: the tragedy of mankind is what dies inside he or she as they live, or they as they live. And what does that mean? We've all said it. When we're born, we're curious. We literally open ourselves up to the world. A 2-day-old baby will stick his arms up in the air to be held and cuddled by anyone. Doesn't matter what color skin they are, doesn't matter if they wear drag. They just want somebody to hold them and acknowledge them as existing. As they live, it's the tribalism in us, those spoken cues that a baby does see from a parent that we don't think they see, but they see.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to make them very fearful, very hateful. That's a piece of us that dies as we live. So what we need to be able to focus on as the best people that we could be is to try to live our lives the best we can, the same way we came out of that one. Curious, open, accepting of all, and try to figure out a way to do that without alienating any individual, anybody from our lives, because every person that comes in our lives is an opportunity for our lives to be enriched.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen. It's genuinely been a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. I'm really grateful that you guys came together for this particular episode. I think there's a lot in here. I don't think I know there's a lot in here for all of us to listen to. And if you are listening at this point, and I certainly encourage you to go back and listen again. There's much for you to think about and much for you to consider. And again, you can reach out to both of these gentlemen. Tony, please tell people where they can find out more about you.
thecureforhate.com. The book, The Cure for Hate, A Former White Supremacist Journey from Violent Extremism to Radical Compassion. You can find it on Amazon. And look out for the Cure for Hate film, bearing witness, thecureforhatefilm.com, bearing witness to Auschwitz as it's doing the festival circuit as we speak.
And having seen it, I will tell you, it is profound. It is moving. I was at the very first screening of it, and the way it moved people was absolutely awesome. And it made everybody in that audience think and look at the world from some very different lenses, and maybe, hopefully, was there to awaken that amnesia and have us remember what we need to remember in order to move forward. Montel, please tell people where they can find out more about you.
You can always catch me on my 2 podcasts, Let's Be Blunt with Montel, and the other one is called Free Thinking with Montel. And also you can get me on Twitter at Montel_Williams or on Facebook at Montel Williams-fan.
Again, we will make sure that all of those links are posted in the show notes. Remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. And, you know, you hear me say that at the end of every show, but never more importantly than today, understanding that those who are giving you a meaning are controlling the tribe that you're in. And that controls the movement of that tribe. If you don't dig in and discover your own meaning, deeper meaning, soulful meaning, you're going to get sort of swept away in some wash of somebody else's nonsense. And that's why political leaders and business leaders who are committed to positively shaping the landscape know that they've got to tap into what drives human behavior, and that is the emotional source code. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe into a healthy, positive, and powerful way, because unified, actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you, me, all of us have been indoctrinated into something that is not true for who we are. We've been given a psychological DNA that is not who we are. And DNA is movable. Whether you know it or not, it is the epigenetic response to the DNA. What does that mean? It means the environment. Put yourself in an environment that serves a greater good. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.